Welcome to Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield. This episode is sponsored by Springs Mental Health Summit, a summit for parents, teachers, neighbors, and friends to talk about mental health in our community. For more information, go to springsummit.org. Here's your host, Trevor Sharon.
Thank you for joining us. We are talking about resiliency today. So parents, tune in. I want to start real quickly with a definition of what resiliency is, because I think the definition is sometimes pretty ambiguous. So Dr. Mayfield, what would you define resiliency as?
I think we could look at it from like 4 or 5 different ways. So I'll give you a couple different perspectives. One is just from a mental perspective, it's elasticity. So it's the ability to be stretched, right? Another way to look at it is it's grit. It's the ability to push through. A formal definition is this idea that it's the capacity for somebody to recover quickly or move through a situation and then bounce back. It's not saying that we get over things. It's the ability to move through things and not let it affect us to the point of crumbling.
So a little bit of that concept of fall down 7 times, get up 8.
Right. Yes, and we learn this. The only way we learn this is going through tough things.
That doesn't sound great.
No, it doesn't. And yet it's such a beautiful life skill. And so it's the ability to go, that sucked. That was disappointing. That didn't turn out the way I wanted it to turn out. And I'm going to sit with that feeling for a while,
right,
and be upset, be sad. But it's not that my life is ruined.
Yeah.
People without resiliency, something happens, disappointment, frustration, didn't go the way you wanted to, and we feel like our life is over.
Which, especially in teens, I remember saying this as I got out of high school, everything seems to be the end of the world when you're young. And it sounds like that is absolutely true without resiliency as well.
It is, and it's an interesting concept because as parents, we'll talk through from a parental standpoint. We want the best for our kids, right? We don't want to see our kids hurt. We don't want to see our kids fail. We don't want to see our kids to lose or struggle. And we have a culture of kids that have participation trophies and never experience disappointment or get whatever they want. And I think the motivation behind that, I want people to hear this, is valid, that we don't want our kids to feel those things, and yet we're setting our kids up for failure.
Elaborate a little bit on that, just in clear terms. If I'm not allowing my kid to fail, how is that ultimately failing them? So
let's use disappointment for example. If you're standing in line at Target and to check out for groceries, and your kid sees the little $4.99 Lego set or the princess whatever, it's a psychological thing. They put it all there for that very reason, for kids to go, oh, mommy, I want. If we give them that every single time, they come to expect that from the world, that whenever I ask about something or I want to get something, I'm going to get it. And if I don't, I'm going to throw a fit, and then I'm going to get it.
Yeah.
For this idea of resiliency, it's allowing our kids to sit with disappointment. No, you can't have that right now because of X, Y, and Z. And, a typical kid will probably put their their bottom lip out and start quivering, and they'll try to, get what they want. It's just the human nature. But if you can say, you know what, I understand this is disappointing for you, and you're probably feeling angry and a little bit sad, and that's okay. Let's talk through that. You're now allowing an opportunity for resilience to be built. Without those opportunities, resiliency can't be built. And I'm not saying, let your kid fail all the time on everything.
Right.
But it's, how do you do that within the confines of your home, with the boundaries that you've got?
Where the risk is moderately low.
Right. And it's, it's when they're, if your kids fight and there's an argument and you sit down and go, this has made mommy and daddy really upset at how you're treating each other, you need to go and really just kind of, well, I'm upset because of this. Well, okay, let's work through that. So it's not only, it's the working through, but it's the emotional intelligence development that goes along with that. To build resiliency is to build emotional intelligence.
Yeah. There's a concept that I don't know if Harvard initialized it, but if you go to developingchild.harvard.edu, you'll see a lot of information about this. It's a really cool analogy of what resiliency can look like for a kid. And so if you picture a kid in the middle, at the fulcrum of a teeter-totter, and the kid is that fulcrum. You have negative effects on one side and positive on the other, and that teeter-totter is going to go one way or another. And we have very little control over what goes into each side of the teeter-totter, but what we do have control over for ourselves in resiliency is where that fulcrum lies. And so getting into just barely any engineering, if you move the fulcrum further to the left, it is going to fall to the right. And so if you learn emotional intelligence, what you're doing is you're essentially moving that fulcrum so that the positive weighs heavier than the negative.
And it's perspective. It goes back to our podcast about growth mindset versus fixed mindset. That if we have a growth mindset, that disappointment, that failure is going to be, okay, this really stinks. I don't like how this feels. It's not the end of the world. I can try again tomorrow, or I'm going to tweak how I look at it, or I'm going to try this differently. And so it's that, you're right, it's that fulcrum being pushed over to the positive side, or actually it's pushed over towards...
it's pushed towards the negative, but it allows
the positive to come down.
Yeah.
But it's also that it's the mindset. And so it's when our child fails or they have disappointment, it's us going, well, just get over it.
Yeah.
Like, stop it. Don't... That's not helping anything.
Right.
That's actually enhancing the negative aspects of it.
Right.
But if you can get down on their level, however, if you have young kids to teenagers, you can look at them in the eyes and go, yeah, I can understand that really stinks right now.
Yeah.
And it probably feels like this, and this.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry. Is there anything I can do to help make it better?
Yeah.
Well, I want the toy. No, sorry.
Right.
That's not going to happen. But it's that intentionality as a parent going, I remember how this feels. I know how this feels. And let me walk with you through that with a caveat. And here's the caveat. If we as parents, if we as adults, if we as human beings have not experienced these things ourselves, there's not a way that we can walk with our kids through that at all.
My father-in-law, we call him Dee-Daw. He is an engineer and a teacher. And his way of teaching is not, here's the information for you to learn, it's figure it out. And once you get to the point where you're totally exasperated, then I'm going to step in and give you the next step as you learn. But it's never this, like, I'm going to hand you the answer kind of thing, which is so frustrating, even as an adult. But it teaches such a valuable lesson, because my wife grew up being told to figure it out. And there was always that time when he would come in as a father and help find that next step. But now there are very few things in our marriage and in our house and all of this that she doesn't immediately go to, okay, let me figure this out. TV's not working. Let me press a bunch of buttons and see if I can make it work before I do X, Y, and Z. And I think that is speaking to that resiliency piece of how do we work through the frustration of this isn't working the way I think it's supposed to, and I don't know how to make it work. So I'm going to try to figure it out and make it happen and build some tough skin to be able to push through that disappointment and frustration.
Yes. And if you've never done something like that,
it's going to be awful.
It's really hard. Yeah, it's hard. And then so that's why I always tell parents when I'm out in the community talking, or when I'm at, the university training counselors, is the best thing we can do for our clients and for our kids and for just in life is provide opportunities. Don't manipulate opportunities, but allow for opportunities for failure to happen in the context of a safe place, and allow your kids to be bored.
Right.
Like, boredom is amazing because it allows for imagination to come out. It allows for resiliency to come out. It allows for a lot of these things. And in the iGen oration of iPads, iPods, tablets, TVs, computers, we don't experience that like we need to.
No. And I think it's so important to say again, let them fail while they're young when the risks are small. If anybody has heard my story, and you either have heard it on a podcast previous, or you will soon, I was really in a bad place in high school. And the mistakes that I was the failure, the opportunity for destruction that I had was so limited because I didn't have a car, I didn't have a job, I wasn't living on my own, I didn't have money to buy certain things. And so my scope of destruction was so much smaller. And I'm so glad that I failed and went through that phase of my life when I did, because if I had done it now, I wouldn't have just ruined my life in completion, but I would have totally affected a lot of people around me as well.
Well, and this is a life skill that we don't. So I think resiliency can go in hand with emotional intelligence. So if parents are like, okay, how do I get my head wrapped around this? Or if you've never really experienced this topic, and you're not a parent but you're an adult or just listening.
Yeah.
Emotional intelligence is a catalyst for resiliency. Because if you can pinpoint, okay, that was disappointing, and here's why it was disappointing, and here's what I'm feeling, it's disappointment, but there's sadness, a little bit of anger, there's, and you can kind of parse out those emotions, they're not as scary. Right. And I use this term, and you've probably heard me say this on the podcast, I say it all the time, is what would it look like to become old friends with your emotions? And this is like, what do you mean? Well, you know the mannerisms, you know the characteristics, you know how long they're going to hang out and hang around, you know what they're going, a lot of times what they're going to say or how they're going to respond in a situation. And so if we can learn to become old friends with our emotions, even the hard emotions that we experience in the resiliency development, it becomes not a fatalistic mindset. It becomes a situational mindset of, it's going to be around for a while. It's going to, like, I failed the test that was going to get me into college. Yeah, that really bites.
Right.
And I'm reevaluating what I'm going to do with my life. Or it can be, the end of the world. Yeah. And I'm just going to hole up in my room and we're not going to do anything. But for, it's that idea of paying attention to those things in you. Because for Trevor, like, sadness for you looks different than sadness for me.
Totally.
My sadness might be malingering or a lingering sadness, where yours is situation, right. And so we can't expect everybody to experience the emotions in the same way, and so we have to be a student of those things.
And I think we were in the conversation together where either you or someone else mentioned that a parent naming an emotion in their kid helps build emotional intelligence.
Yes.
Can you talk just a little bit more about that? Because I think that ties in so perfectly with what we're talking about.
I think it was a conversation we had with Brad Baker, a good friend of ours. We were in conversation about when he gets down with his kids, and I really work hard at doing this too. I can see that you're really frustrated. I'm wondering if or I can see that you're really disappointed, or I can see that you're angry, I can see that you're sad. So you're naming what they're feeling on their level in a kind gesture. It validates what they're feeling for a minute, and it provides that safety for them to emote.
Yeah.
But now they go, okay, when I feel this way, my dad says or my mom says that this is sadness. And this is where we have to be spot on, where we have to be reflective and aware of our own things. I'm a little biased. I give myself that in the sense that this next statement is going to sound biased, but the best thing you can do for yourself is to be in counseling.
Yeah.
We run a counseling organization, and we really are passionate about this, but you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And I was just reflecting on this. My wife and I were talking about this the other day of what would it have been like if I had never gone back to school to become a counselor? Where would our marriage be? Where would we be as parents? I have learned so much, and I've been challenged so much. And I think just a plug for good counseling is that if you find a good counselor, they've actually been put through the ringer themselves to reflect on their struggles and their idiosyncrasies and their highs and their lows to get into that place of becoming a counselor. They've had to reflect a lot. And almost scary to think of where we would be as a couple and as parents if we hadn't, and we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But it is that awareness that I think a lot of us don't realize we don't have
Right.
until we get put in a situation. So a plug for counseling, but a plug for just getting good people in your life
Right.
to help challenge and guide you and grow you.
Yeah. As we talk about emotional intelligence, I'm reminded of the movie Inside Out, which is
Love it.
spectacular.
Paul Ekman, any of his books are amazing.
Right. They're absolutely incredible. And it's done in such an entertaining way that you kind of don't realize that you're learning a lot too. You can look up an emotion wheel online, and it'll show you the primary, secondary, and tertiary, which means third. A lot of my friends have questioned that. But it'll show you all of those emotions, and it's interesting to see how they break down, where we find that anger is actually a secondary emotion. And that it typically is covering up something else, and digging deeper into kind of an intellectual understanding of what emotions are and how they break down is really important, because it can give words to some of the things that we're feeling. And we have a worksheet that Dr. Mayfield created, and it's just a simple worksheet where you go through different senses, and very, very good at allowing you to really understand what you were feeling in a moment and explain it in a way that's very unique. And we would love to be able to work through that with you. If you reach out to us, we can talk you through how to do that as well.
I wonder too if we can get it, put on our website someplace where you can go and download it, or on the Facebook page or something like that, where it's a PDF and you guys, the listeners can go look at it.
Yeah.
It's really helped me out of making more sense of my emotional status, and I think keeps in the forefront of my mind the need for resiliency, the need for grit, and really, if you think about grit is that mental and emotional toughness,
Right.
To push through.
I mean, you look at the old Westerns, True Grit, like
Right.
that's kind of like a good look definition of what it looks like.
Well, here's another visual picture of resiliency, is that you always see like you're just going through a tough time, and like let's say the meme that I see, or the picture that I see, is this person just digging in a gold mine, and he's digging this tunnel, and he's been doing this for months, and he's just discouraged, like, I'm not getting anywhere. And as you zoom out of the picture, he's about 30 feet or 10 feet away from a payload.
Yeah.
Of hitting, this vein of gold.
Right.
And I think for us too, it's that we can't see what the future holds.
Totally.
And so it can get frustrating. It can get tiring. It can be at times overwhelming to continue to push forward and to push through. But we don't know when that breakthrough is. Right. We don't know when there's that relief because we can't see in the future. And so this is such an important, again, conversation of why to have good people in your life that can be your champions and cheer you on, but also be that mentor or that guide to help you with that, because maybe they see something that you don't. And I always tell my clients, and this is, it's tongue in cheek, but there's some truth to it, that if anybody tells you to get over something, you have my permission to slap them, because we never get over things. We get through things, and those getting through things actually change the makeup of our humanity.
Yeah. I'll give a little bit of self-disclosure. I, back in 2011, got a tattoo on my back that meant a lot to me at the time. And I got it in a font that represented some of my past, and on my back to represent that it was in the past. And it simply said, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And about 3 months after I got this tattoo, Kelly Clarkson came out with her song, and I have not heard the end of it. My siblings will not stop singing it anytime they see it, and it genuinely a difficult thing for me to go through, because I just got this tattoo that meant a lot to me, and now it's completely ruined by this dumb song. But I think it speaks to a powerful truth that what doesn't kill you does make you stronger, and there are things that we need to do because to build resiliency, because there are going to be situations that do have deadly consequences. We live in a scary world sometimes. And if we aren't prepared, if we aren't able to get up after we fall down, then all we do is lay there. And there's only destruction and hurt that comes from there. And we need to take those baby steps, especially in childhood, to allow ourselves to build resiliency. And it's a step-by-step process. It really is baby steps.
It's baby steps. I guess it comes down to this. How fulfilling of a life do you want to live? I'm just going to put that question out there. Because we cannot experience that joy, that peace, that satisfaction, even if it's for a moment, even if it's for a season, unless we work through some of these hard things. You can't, and we always talk about this through our emotional intelligence talks, is that you can't have joy unless you have sadness too, right? You can't have hope unless you have pain, and it comes back to that fulfillment of life. It's not that life's going to be any different or any less hard.
Sure.
It's the mindset. It's where the fulcrum is placed.
Yeah.
For us to experience. Some of the most joyful people I've ever met in my life have been in third world countries when I've traveled the world, in Nepal or in Africa, because they understand that life itself is the gift. And it's how they look at that through that lens. And I think as Western culture, we lose sight of just the preciousness of life.
Sure. Yeah, we may not have control over what goes into our positive or negative sides of the teeter-totter at all. I mean, we really don't. A lot of the things that I was finding was on the Harvard website was you have a loss of a family member, which goes into the negative. You have a teacher who gets trained, and that goes in your positive. You have neglectful parents, or you have really caring parents. A lot of these things we don't have control over, and I'd say most of them we don't. But what we do have control over is our perception of what's going on and where that fulcrum lies.
Yes. And so if you have questions, again, we've shared our contact information. Candid at mayfieldcounseling.com, contact at mayfieldcounseling.com. You can call us 719-452-4803. Whatever we can do to support you in this, but it's for those that are, kind of like, wow, this is stuff that I've never heard before. Let us know how we can support you in your journey and in your growth, because this could be life-changing, not just for you, but for generations in your family to come.
Yeah. And I would highly encourage you to read anything by Brene Brown.
Yes.
Fantastic author, talks a lot about resiliency. Her book, Rising Strong, has been really impactful, talking about the fact that we will fall. We don't have an option in that.
Or also just mark your calendars for November 3rd, 2018 here in Colorado Springs for the second annual Springs Mental Health Summit, featuring a lot of different breakouts and our keynote speaker, Dr. Caroline Leaf, because these will be topics we'll be talking about as well.
Right. And you can find information on that summit at springssummit.org. We would love to see you. Dr. Mayfield and I are hoping to do a lunch special recording of Candid Conversations live. And so we would love to see you participate in that, put some faces to some names. We're looking forward to that and hope you are as well. Thanks for joining us today. Go out, be strong, get up if you're down, and build some resiliency.
Thank you for joining Candid Conversations. If you would like more information, go to mayfieldcounseling.com/Candid Conversations and check out our Facebook page, Candid Conversations with Dr. Mayfield. If you or someone you know need someone to talk to, call Mayfield Counseling Centers at 719-452-4803.